we're not trying to earn titles or awards and all that. Like, no one remembers what Steve Jobs, Mother Teresa, MLK like earned. They just know their names and what it evokes and what it means. So I think my name is enough. I also think my birthday is enough. I don't think my death date matters, because in theory, you can live forever if you build something that does, and that's always the goal.
Hi everyone, it's Jo. You're listening to Occupational Hazards, a series of candid conversations with some of the most inspiring people I know, as they share their path to finding their calling and all the gritty realities of their jobs. Whether you want to demystify your dream job, or are someone like me who enjoys getting a peek into other people's work lives, then this is the podcast for you. Our guest today is unique in that he has made it his life's mission to help other people find their calling. Chen is a creator and entrepreneur in the worlds of entertainment, tech, and community activism. He started his career in places like the Walt Disney Company and YouTube, where he was the global head of creator development and management. In addition to having co-founded tech startups in the past, he currently serves as an advisor or board member at tech firms such as Google. You may have heard of it. A virtual reality and animation studio, various consumer products companies, and nonprofits. He was previously on the advisory board of ByteDance, better known as the parent company of TikTok. Again, you may have heard of it. More recently, he's channeled his leadership skills and his unique ability to mobilize communities by co-founding Gold House, a collective of pioneering Asian cultural leaders. He also co-founded the Group, a premier multicultural film fund. Its first film, Passing, starring Tessa Thompson, Ruth Negga, Andre Holland, and Alexander Skarsgård, was written and directed by Rebecca Hall and will be making its debut at the Sundance Film Festival this year. Through the years, Bing has been featured on The Hollywood Reporter's 35 Under 35 list, Magic Johnson's 32 Under 32 list, and Forbes magazine's 30 Under 30 list. And that's really just the tip of the iceberg. If all the world were a stage, then Bing would be the ultimate player. And I mean that in the best way possible. Player as in he's an entertainer, he's a contender in every field he enters, and undoubtedly a charmer. I've never seen anyone approach life with such vim, vigor, and vitality. And Bing is an English major, so I know he's going to appreciate that alliteration. Without further ado, here's Bing.
Hi, Bing.
Hi, Jojo. Thanks for the very inflated intro.
How are you? Where are you in your pandemic arc? As my friend asked me the other day, I love the way you phrase that question, so I'm going to use it in all my interviews.
Oh, I feel like no answer is a good answer unless it apologizes. I'm okay. I'm really tired. But you know, like everyone privileged, I feel grateful to be healthy and all the things. So yeah, no complaints, I guess.
Okay. If you had to describe, so I gave a quick overview of what you did for the listeners, but if you had to describe what you did, like in your own words, how would you describe it?
I'll give you two answers. So one is the practical side. I call it world building. So the principle is, if we're not born into a world that satisfies us, that elevates us, that supports us, then it's incumbent on us to build that world. Whether that world comes from improved healthcare and governmental policies, whether that world comes through creative entertainment and media, because we want to shape or rather reshape and transform perceptions that can result in something practical, or other dimensions. So I think that's the simplest way of saying it. The other side is, and this is the annoying like BS motivational speaker, business school, whatever side is, my mother used to say that you don't want to be a noun ever. Your goal is to be a verb. And so the idea is like, you know, you should never say you want to be a CEO, or you should never say you're a professor or whatever. You should just say you help mobilize or lead or teach. And so I think more of my life, and I think this is why I struggle with like titles and pronouns or proper nouns even, I'm just here to do great work with good people that helps deliver people's purpose.
Okay. And what does that look like on a, like, what would an average day look? I mean, no day for you is average because you're doing so many different things, but maybe you
All
can.
days are average. So no sleeping in, but ever. No, at a practical level, the way I see it is through creative worlds. And the reason why is all things are both inductive and deductive, or come from the bottoms up or tops down. Inductively, I'm just viscerally motivated by creativity. I don't know why. It's just, I get really excited about, rose petal following and Beauty and the Beast. Get really excited about big communal experiences like Coachella. And I can't explain why. I just like it. At a deductive level, media and creative development often is a progenitor, if not the earliest progenitor, of mass societal change. Said another way, cultural changes often precede policy and governmental legal changes. So the hackneyed example I often evoke in the United States is we had a Black president in the Oval Office on TV and film long before we did in the actual Oval Office in Washington, D.C. There were several instances of this. The president of the world in the movie Fifth Element was Black. The president in the show 24 within the 2000s was Black. And then, of course, these two instances predated Barack Obama, who ended up being the first Black president of the United States. And so the reason this is so important is creativity, because people only grow up seeing through their own eyes and with their own ears. They only know what they've seen and what they've heard, which is very little comparative to what 8 billion people can collectively see and hear together. And so it's incumbent on media to show people what else is possible, because then it starts to ignite, oh, well, if that's possible in my mind, perhaps it's possible in my hands and therefore in the world. And so at a very practical level, I think of my day job in two ways. One is through that creative storytelling, and then the second is through systems and services that help apply it at a personalized level for various consumers, humans, et cetera. So on the content side, we think about, how do you build the next great Star Wars? How do you build the next great Wizarding World? What is the anchor content? Is it a film? Is it a novel? And then how do you exploit that in a really creative way to other creative formats, just so you can get more out of it? On the other side, the question is, how do you distribute it? And then how do you make it useful to people? So instead of, investing in, let's say, a Walt Disneyland for a variety of reasons, I would instead invest in a sleep tracker. Or invest in physical spaces that alleviate co-working or parenting. When you're a busy parent, you may have multiple children who need to be taken care of. So that's how I think about sort of the structure of my life.
I listened to another interview that you did talking about franchises, and you were talking about one of the biggest franchises, which is like Pokémon, right? Which actually cuts across all
the
those
biggest.
Worlds. Yeah, which cuts across all those worlds you discussed, where it pops off the screen into virtual worlds and then in your physical world. So in terms of the work that you're doing right now, is there anything you're particularly excited about in terms of if you can talk about it, something that has the potential to be the next big franchise?
Yeah, I'm most excited about my own creative franchise. It's highly precarious, not scalable. Who knows if it does well, but it's the only thing I've really thought about constantly since I was a kid. And so I've tried to study as best I could, what are the most successful franchises? What do they have in common? So as you just articulated, Pokemon is by far the most lucrative franchise in history. Star Wars, the Wizarding World, as well as the Marvel Cinematic Universe are the other ones I've studied. So mine pulls from different elements of each. So mine is novel based. So it's, in that regard, it's like the Wizarding World from J.K. Rowling. It's 9 stories, a trilogy. So in that regard, it's like Star Wars. We're starting with number 4. So the first and second trilogy. So once again, it's like Star Wars. And then we have 7 commercial extensions at launch, including a podcast, a bracelet, a comic, a suit line, and so forth. And the whole purpose of that is, one, I think creativity has to be 5 senses. If you're only doing one medium, it's just not compelling. And also in today's market, you cannot compete on one plane. You have to compete at the franchise level. Now, I recognize that not everyone, including myself, has the wherewithal of a $320 billion market cap company like the Walt Disney Company to produce a franchise from scratch. But we can be really creative with our friends, whether through their companies that they have or even their time, to engineer something at least somewhat more creatively compelling. And so that's what I'm most excited about. It's all about death. So one of the big distinctions between my franchise and others is mine's entirely grounded in reality, and mine doesn't exist as a fictitious allegory to inform and inspire people in their practical day lives. I hope that there's so much practicality in my franchise that there's immediate ramifications at a practical level in day-to-day society. So because ours is based on death, as you could surmise, it's all about the meaning of life. It's all about how you live a more meaningful life, but without the sort of BS acronymic cheese of like business books. And there's a lot of different rituals, services, events, and so forth that happen in my creative universe that I hope actually exist imminently within the real world.
So what keeps you the most busy these days? For Gold House, for instance, you were instrumental in the box office openings and success of many movies that had Asian American creators. In terms of kind of helping your community outreach activities, what are you busy with right now?
I would say I'm busiest with human emotions, because people have these things called emotions that they like to weaponize sometimes. But I don't know. I mean, I think the things that occupy most of my time are finishing the franchise. So the novel's almost done. And obviously all 9 have been constructed already. The second piece is absolutely Gold House. Gold House is entering its phase 2 plan, which I'm beyond stoked about. It's everything we've been building to, and it'll last us about 5 years or so. And then the final piece is just making sure all the companies I have the privilege of being on the board of or advising or supporting continue to thrive. Luckily, all of them but one have done so. One unfortunately passed away during the pandemic, but the others are doing really, really well.
My deepest condolences. What is your favorite part about what you do? Of all the things you do, you know?
My favorite part about what I do is that I'm doing what I want to do. And I know it's so sad to say that that's the best thing, because it is unfortunately so rare. I mean, I think we all know that like nothing is perfect, and certainly my life is far from perfect, but you know, at the end of the day, like I feel like I make very few concessions in my life. I'm doing exactly what my dream is. When I close my eyes, if I had, you know, $10 billion, no fear, every resource at my fingertips, I would be doing the exact same thing I'm doing now. And I know how privileged of a statement that is to make. So without question, it's that. I think the second piece is, and this is heavily by design. I am lucky to work at the intersection of so many different industries. I mean, at base value, you know, it's entertainment, technology, and commerce or advertising. And that privilege of being at the intersection of at least 3 different industries is just really liberating, because you constantly get to learn new things. You get to learn so many, and you get to meet so many incredible new people. I mean, two of the big things that I was trying to learn in the last 2 years are, one, on the activism front, learning much more about sociocultural identity and how it works intersectionally across communities has been really educational for me, and something I'm really appreciative of, because whether it's art or politics, we are an identity-based system increasingly now. And then the second is physical products. So I really didn't know anything about anything physical, because everything I do is immaterial, like on the internet, which is kind of sad and hilarious. But last year, I've always been a lover of food, because we all are. I've always been a lover of fashion, because unfortunately you have to wear clothes if you go outside. And so I've been trying to learn a lot more about those creative as well as business processes, which has been really liberating.
Nice. I love your line of suits.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, I have not seen anything like it, so.
Oh, that's the highest compliment. Those suits are the Jedi robe of my creative franchise, actually. Most people don't know that. They're I can regale you with how there are 7 of them, and they gestalt into this like Megazord suit. And yeah, anyway.
Amazing. Yeah, you're one of the few people I know who kind of geeks out over all the things that I like to geek out over.
Aww.
So yeah, we speak the same language. But
Yeah.
the flip side of kind of what's your favorite part about what you do, like what's maybe your least favorite part, or it doesn't have to be the least favorite, but maybe the least glamorous that other people might, you know, not look at as ideal.
Oh, that's easy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's a ton. It's slow as hell. When you're building your own dream, just because you have fewer resources, it's slow. You know, I looked at my like YouTube experience. I spent 4 years there. I built, you know, effectively a $50 billion industry from scratch. I've been working on this franchise for 4 years and feel like I have nothing to show for it because it hasn't launched yet. So I think latency and lack of resources is really exhausting, but you know, it obviously also builds grit. It also forces you to be creative with how you get resources. The ones that you end up getting are truly yours, yada, yada, yada. But that's latency is certainly one. I think second is the lack of like functional lifestyle resources. So something that I think most people don't know is I actually have not had a salary in probably 4.5 years, which is crazy for someone who made $500,000 every year, you know, as a mid 20 something at Google. And so, you know, it's the amount of, I'm not implying that like, oh yeah, look at me, I was like so white collar, like, so like I have savings and I'm okay. But I recognize all that. But the reality is like, you know, if you have so much or everything and then you give it up, you basically give up everything for your dream, it's painful. And so I think a lot of people don't realize that most entrepreneurs and most people who are, you know, going for their dream are struggling for it. And it's partly by design, you know, like I run really lean ships. If I really wanted to go find more money, I could, but, you know, I think it would be distracting. But, you know, being in literally like the bottom decile of like income brackets, having crappy healthcare plans, like all that, it really sucks. And again, I understand I come from a privileged place, so there are others in different sort of, you know, positions, but that's not fun. And then the final one that I would never lament because I love what I do, but like everyone who's chasing their dream, I work a lot. So my days are without question 7 to midnight nonstop. I work all Sunday. And I think there are, I was recently reminded, one of my friends works 10 to 5. I was recently reminded most people don't do that. But once again, like I wouldn't complain about that because, you know, I love what I do, but I think there are many who would not share that enthusiasm.
One of the things that has been kind of a trending topic as of late, because I think there's been this whole glamorization of hustle culture, but then real conversations have started to emerge about the burnout that can result from that, particularly for entrepreneurs and creators, right?
Yeah.
So what have you done? I mean, even pre-pandemic, but especially in the past few months, like what have you done to, I guess, take care of your physical, mental well-being?
Yeah, so health is definitely number one. As the son of a father who died of cancer when I was a teenager, I've seen this unfortunately firsthand. My father was phenomenally economically successful despite coming from abject poverty, and died basically by the time he was 56. For what, you know? And so it's health is something that is non-negotiable for me. I try to get 7 to 8 hours of sleep each night without fail. Now, obviously, that's been difficult during the pandemic because we all have latent anxiety. But generally speaking, I do sleep that much. I remember in my first years at Google, I was like such a little shit and thought it was so sexy to only get 4 hours of sleep a night because clearly that indicates that I'm working so hard. But that's all so stupid. I mean, not sleeping well is literally worse than smoking. And so sleep is really important. I work out 5 to 6 days a week without fail with my trainer. I have an incredible diet. It's basically keto, yada, 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 yada. So yeah, like, you know, I think taking care of your physical being is really important. I also make sure I take care of my mental well-being. So I have a set of different sort of release rituals, whether it's like meditation or sound baths or otherwise, to like recenter myself. I'm also day-to-day very militant about my time. So I don't meet with most people. You know, partly because I want to empower my teams to be able to do so because it's just more in their domain, and partly because I need to be guarded with my time, because all of our time is precious. So yeah, does that answer it?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's just, I think it doesn't get talked about enough, so it's refreshing to hear somebody kind of reference that it is a challenge. What did you want to be when you were little? Was it always this? And if not, when did you decide that you wanted to do this?
It was always this, but it was faster and less painful. I've always wanted to be the next Walt Disney / Oprah. The reason why is I just thought that those two individuals, better than anyone, built really incredible creative worlds that were useful, right? And useful in different ways. So yeah, that's always been the dream. Why? Where does that come from? I mean, you know, like I said earlier, I think it's both irrational inductive and then rational deductive. So inductively, I just get really excited and am really, really exceptional at helping people. Like if someone has a dream, I'm really good at teasing that out and I'm really good at like getting them at least closer to where they want to be. I think it probably comes from the way I was raised. My mother especially is a phenomenally giving person. And my father, you know, afforded us a lifestyle where our eyes were just opened up very early on multiple continents. So I know what abundance looks like when it's deployed properly and generously. So I think that's one side. But then deductively, as I mentioned earlier, I think if you look empirically at what humanity wants, we all are just searching for the meaning of life, and that usually manifests as one, familial relationships, and two, as meaningful impact, which is often conflated with career, though it's not always. I just think that media enterprises and universes are the best way to deliver both efficiently as well as impactfully. There are other systems that may sort of reconcile meaning at a more practical level. So the law, of course, is one. Can you immigrate into a country? Can you get married? Can you have children? All the things. Healthcare is another one, but the reality is those industries are profoundly slow, entirely because of bureaucracy and sort of mixed interests. Whereas once again, I think through creative universes, this intersection of media, entertainment, technology, and commerce, I think we can just move much faster. And we just have many more sort of frequent data points and touch points to consumers.
It probably helps us imagine worlds in the other industries.
There's no question. I mean, one of my favorite examples of this, and I think this underscores the practicality of media, is NBC actually made a deliberate parlance change when they moved from illegal aliens, as it was, to undocumented immigrants. And they were the first mainstream broadcast, whether TV, print, or otherwise, entity to do this. And by no coincidence, shortly thereafter, there were sweeping changes to undocumented immigrant rights in the United States. So this is a literal example of where literally two words will change things. Actually, one word rather will change things. Another example is the famous Blue Marvel photograph that was taken was because astronauts on the Apollo mission were really nostalgic. By no coincidence, the first Earth Day about a year and a half, 2 years later was erected. And by no coincidence, shortly thereafter, there were sweeping environmental changes made in this country. And that was literally from a picture from nostalgic astronauts, And so I think this just underscores, whether through imagery or through text and words, how much art has always been a progenitor of change, across the board. I mean, you go even back further to the Renaissance and the Reformation. Both were started really because of Martin Luther's 99 Theses. Those are just words, and granted, they're powerful words in a manifesto, but they quite literally reshaped the modern world as we know it. Beginning with religion, but very quickly expanding therefore into science and art and so forth. So I fervently believe in art, not just because it seems like the cool thing to say, but we have so many practical data points of how it has always been the fire that has lit fundamental transformations in society.
What were you like when you were in high school and college? And how did you choose? You mentioned you're very particular about your time. So how did you choose kind of the activities you would get involved in when you were in school?
Yeah, I think I think it was really similar. I think the biggest difference I noticed is I'm much tamer, more measured, and I guess less like, I don't know, slightly less outwardly ebullient than I used to be. And I think that just comes with wanting to be, more measured, maybe being a little more tired, who knows? But I think there are lots of consistencies, like my zeal for life and the gift that I think my mother largely gave me of like seeing the world as miraculous and how much could be, but maybe is not today, has never wavered. If anything, it's only been emboldened. And I think it's been emboldened because of exposure to others who have done great things and also my own experiences. I think second is I've always punched above my weight. Like all of us, I've always felt like, not that I deserve to be something special, but that I am capable of being someone special. And therefore, like, when everyone in college was doing, college campus-based activities, I looked at something across the Ivy League and then eventually expanded that entity into China with the Chinese government and the European Student Union, as well as the Turkish National Assembly. And obviously globality is only one dimension that you can look at bigness. There's others like cross-industry, there's others like cross-communities. But I think looking beyond our borders and walls into what can fundamentally reshape, at least for now, 8 billion people, has always been my MO. I think another thing that's always been different is, or it's always been the same, is my zeal for our species. Like I just believe in humanity, and this may be a little ethnocentric. I'm sure someone who's an environmentalist or someone is going to ding me for this, but I don't know. I just really, really believe in the capacity of humanity to continue to do great things and stay good. Now, obviously, there's been a lot of data points that have disheveled that fervor, but I think there's also enough that indicate otherwise. I saw a meme recently. I don't know if this is true or not, but allegedly Mr. Rogers, when he was a young child, would watch the news. And, as we all know, the news is overpopulated with a bunch of salacity. So it's always sex, drugs, car chases, all that, because humanity unfortunately gravitates towards negativity. And his mother, allegedly, according to this unverified meme, would say, don't look at that, look for the helpers. And that really spoke to me, because while it may seem like there are fewer of us who are warriors for each other, I think increasingly as I've gotten older, I find more and more of us. And that's really, I think, encouraging. And, I think just like sustained, and if anything, emboldened, expanded my zeal for that.
Maybe it's the whole your vibe attracts your tribe thing. You're vibrating at a certain level, therefore you're attracting certain people at a similar frequency.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or liberating other people to vibrate at that frequency.
It's true. I mean, everyone wants to do, like, how do I say this? It is impossible to be in this world and not want to be seen or do something. It is impossible. Everyone wants to be seen, and everyone wants to know who they are and whether it matters. Everyone who says they don't is lying. Everyone who does something that society may deem as objectively dangerous or bad is still trying to just cry for help. And they're just projecting, effectively acrimony in an apologetic way, or, an undesirable way. So yeah, I think it's incumbent on all of us to, I don't want to use like the word liberation, because that comes from like a presumptuous, vaulted and semi-draconian like pedestal, but it is incumbent on us to help each other, and it's incumbent on us to continue to help each other to be free.
Speaking of helping, what advice would you give to somebody who wanted to be the next thing, or who wanted to follow in your footsteps, or kind of carve out the type of freedom and creative fulfillment that you have?
Yeah, so I think the first lesson is don't be Bing. You should be you. The reason why is like I say Walt Disney, Oprah, but like I really mean an amalgam that is inspired by them. I don't mean them literally. It's just more efficient to say that. You should only be you, because there's only one you. And if you're trying to be singular and memorable, you'll never do so by being in someone else's mold or shadow. So I think, having the courage to understand who you really are, what motivates you, and most importantly, what your end state is really important. I think the second piece is not confusing means with ends. So a lot of people, I remember especially at our alma mater, Jojo, would be like, I want to be a consultant or an iBanker. And candidly, that's just not, those are jobs. That's not a career. And that's certainly not a mission, And so I think understanding what your end state mission is at a qualitative level is probably the place that most of us should start, appreciating that there will be, a fairly tumultuous, detouring road there. And then I think the third thing is, you just have to do it. And this sounds really simple, but the difference between those who are truly spectacular and great in my life, and by spectacular, I mean objectively spectacular in how society, fortunately, unfortunately, calibrates their socioeconomic value. Like I have several friends who are self-made billionaires. The only difference between them and those who are just great is they just did it. It's about persistence. It's about not playing politics. It's about getting things done. It's about having the courage to say no and yes when the right time commits. And that's it. It's not because they are more talented. It's not because they went to better schools. It's not because they're smarter. It's not because they had more resources at the start. It's none of that. It's just because they didn't stop and they didn't ask permission. And so I think, if you have the privilege of having conviction in your mission, then you have a responsibility to just go chase it and not stop until you have it.
Yeah. What career advice or life advice would you give to somebody who, you're talking about means and ends, not everyone is maybe financially capable at this point to just drop everything and pursue their dreams, but what are ways in which they can, do it, side hustle nights and weekends?
Yeah, so there are different schools of thought on this. And so because there are different schools of thought, there's different molds that work for different people based on circumstances. So whatever works for you is good. The important thing across all options, though, is consistency. So I definitely believe in like side hustles and, doing, grinding on nights and weekends and so forth. The problem is you're often so exhausted in your day job, you actually don't have the energy to sustain it in your night side hustles or weekend side hustles. And that can be very problematic over time because, you'll start to get into one of those modes where last year you'll say next year, and then you'll say next year again, and then you never do it. And so I think, you know, as long as, even if you're devoting 10 minutes of your day, and everyone can devote 10 minutes to something, just, you know, skip lunch or eat lunch while you do it, for instance, I think is really, really important.
I mean, didn't J.K. Rowling write Harry Potter when she was in between waitressing jobs, like on napkins?
Yeah, that's exactly right. It's exactly right.
She's the one that comes to mind, where she was able to make it happen. I mean, it took time, but she made it happen despite kind of some of the limitations.
That's exactly right.
If you could go back in time, you know, would you do anything differently in terms of the path you pursued? Would you, you know, do something earlier, like not do certain things at all?
Oh yeah, I mean, there's a ton of stuff. Where do I begin? I would have left. I would have started my own creative franchise right out of Google. That's the first thing. I would have just bet on myself and not relied on others. I think that's for sure one. I think second is I would have been a lot smarter about my economic status after I had left and pursued my own route. I did the whole like creative grind where I was like, I'm going to starve. I'm basically going to sleep on couches. And I did it not for romantic purposes, because I think that's weird and like, you know, voyeuristic almost, if you come from privilege. But I did it because I wanted to save money. And I realized that actually having a stable anchor when you're an entrepreneur, whether it comes in the form of money or a stable home, which creates mental stability, is really, 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 really essential. And in fact, non-negotiable. The sort of, you know, romance and delight of like, you know, starving in the streets and all that, like if you can avoid it, must be avoided. So I would have changed that too. Yeah, I think that's probably it. I'm kind of satisfied with everything else. I'm not saying like I did everything else right, but I think those are probably the two biggest things.
Yeah. And you know what? One of my favorite parts of your story is that you were one of the staunchest defenders of the liberal arts education, and one of those English majors that's actually gone on to show what you can do with that type of degree. I don't know what it was like for you when you were kind of telling your parents you wanted to choose that major. But like I'm based in Asia right now, and there's this huge, and where you lived for a bit also, but there is this major emphasis on, you know, degrees and certifications and the whole, you know, proof of accomplishment, and also this notion that things should be useful. And so when somebody, you know, tells their parents they want to major in English, it's, if you have traditional parents, it's not always met with, you know, enthusiasm. So I guess in your case, what would you tell somebody who wanted to major in English about how that helped your career?
Yeah, so I would say a couple things first before I get into utility. First is there is a global zeitgeist change of whether your major has a practical impact on your day-to-day job. And increasingly the answer is no, there's no superficial correlation, or increasingly no superficial correlation between the two. I mean, you'll probably remember the person in my class who got the Rhodes Scholarship was like a classical studies major. One of the people who got into Harvard Law was an English major. One of the people who got into Johns Hopkins Med was like some other soft liberal arts major. So there's increasingly less and very little correlation between major and your immediate profession. The second piece, and I'm not condoning this per se, but I lied to my parents until the day of graduation of what my major was. I think they always thought I was doing philosophy, politics, and economics. Like I said, yeah, that's great. That's absolutely what I'm doing. And they didn't know any better until they saw it flash on the big screen in front of 10,000 people. And so if you have to lie because you have realized that you sometimes have to outparent your parents, which is awkward because that flips the dynamic, you should do it. Because it's just sometimes easier that way if it's a white lie. The third thing, though, I think is important is balance. So even though I had an ostensibly soft liberal arts English and specifically creative writing major, which is one of the softest, if not the softest you could have, my extracurriculars were all heavily business oriented. So, you know, Ivy Council, we were forging relationships with the Chinese government, the European Student Union, and Turkish National Assembly. I was interning at the Walt Disney Company. So there was immense balance there, and I wasn't one note. And I think that's that notion of balance, I think, is important regardless of where you are. And then I think the third thing that's most important is a lot of people pursue practical or useful majors and jobs because they feel like they need to check progressive lists. But the reality is, once again, like you can't confuse means, aka progressive lists, with ends, aka Walt Disney Oprah. And so I basically looked at Walt Disney Oprah, I was like, what degrees did y'all have? And do I even need something like an MBA from Harvard? And the answer is hell no. You know, I don't, in fact, you don't need any degree to be either of them. And there's more than enough, successful entrepreneurs who've dropped out of reputable and non-reputable institutions who've been very successful. Now, I'm not condoning that per se. You should graduate if you can, but you should focus on what your end state is and see what's required to get there. As I got like through Google, for instance, I was this sort of notion was punctuated. So my first boss, who graduated from Harvard twice, she was an HBS alum on the second one. She was #4 employee at Match.com, aka co-founder of one of the most successful companies. She said, being like, going to Harvard for an MBA is a waste of time because Google is the best MBA you could find. And that was really valuable to me because I realized, an MBA is actually just useful really for its networks. I already have the Ivy League undergrad degree, so I don't need another one, right? And I recognize not everyone has that, but still, like, everyone has something valuable. And so I thought, okay, well, if it's just a network and I'm already getting my network here, plus I'm really tenacious and I love talking to people, like, why would I go to B school? Now, is that to say that I have every contact in the world and its mother? Of course not. I'm sure I'm missing a gazillion, but do I have enough and am I doing fine? The answer is yes. So I think once again, figure out who you really want to be in the end state. And, based on your idols or an amalgam of your idols, ask yourself, do you really, really need a progressive list path that all of your peers are pursuing? In terms of why creative writing in English was valuable, and this is different for everyone, because, my family's very middle class, so, we can kind of afford to do this, but, I liked creative writing, and I thought undergraduate school was about teaching me how to think as opposed to what to think. And I think how to think is so important because you're still so young. Why would you box yourself in that young, especially if you're trying to invent new industries? Anyone who's invented an industry, truly invented an industry, was not placating someone else that already existed or fit themselves inside another mold. By definition, you're breaking those molds. And so English and creative writing, by definition, is about how do you reimagine abstractions like love and hate and good and evil, and then make it into something useful. And like, is that not the hardest thing in the world? Like, said another way, more simply, why should a poem matter? A poem shouldn't matter at all. And yet, poems and words have started reformations. They have ended wars. They change undocumented immigration status. They start hate crime, like, all of the things. And so, I think in that regard, not only teaching me how to think, but showing me how far you have to go to make something that doesn't matter matter, has been beyond thrusting for my career. And absolutely the source of, whether it's creating the influencer ecosystem or creating my new Walt Disney, it's absolutely the fundamental philosophy that's gone in all of it.
Yeah. How, in terms of, current events, how has the pandemic affected your philosophy toward work and maybe some of the things you prioritize in your career or your choices?
So I don't want to sound egotistical, but it's only reinforced that I'm doing and my teams are doing the right thing in the right ways. So the pandemic, and I'm going to speak from a very narrow lens. I am not speaking for every situation. So I recognize once again the privileged position we're in. But one is, if you're not essential, you're not going to last. If you're not a make or break or absolutely useful, you won't last. And so luckily, all of my companies but one have lasted. And I think it's because they're not only led by smart, tenacious teams, but because they're doing something that is fundamentally useful for the world. The second piece is all my companies have been built in a distributed fashion. So we were prepared for this. And if anything, we actually have not changed any of our operations really in a material way. And I mean internal operations. We're all distributed across the globe. We all work in every time zone. We know how to invent things from scratch, even though, physical proximity creates great serendipity. We've been able to figure out ways around that. Maybe not to the same degree of being physically proximate, but definitely close enough that no one would know the better. So yeah, we've been built for this. The third thing, though, I think that has opened our eyes to, of course, is mass disparity. So if you look in the US, for instance, Black and brown communities are disproportionately affected by lower healthcare access because of systemic bias, lower access to PPP loans, as well as other economic relief benefits because of past non-existent relationships with banks. And this, once again, stems from a system-based bias that is unfair. And so I think it's it's helped us open our eyes really to not that this exists, because I think we all know it exists, but the degree to which it exists, but also I think the degree to which we can be helpful, and being helpful, not just in terms of like charity, because that's once again reductive, and that honestly doesn't sustain at all, but being helpful in a really cross-pollinative way, because we're all in this together, and the solutions that we deploy to one community necessarily directly impact and benefit another, often the giver. And so this period has been really instructive for us of not only how can we be allies, but how can we co-elevate together in a really meaningful way, whether it's through economics, whether it's through art or otherwise.
Yeah. So, my former boss, I agree with everything you said. I'm just thinking in terms of advice. One of my former bosses that I worked for actually used to scare off potential job applicants. He would tell them all the challenges of the position. He would not, give them the rainbows and unicorns version of the job. So you've touched on it a bit in terms of, some of the challenges or the least glamorous parts of your job. But if you had to kind of fill in the blanks, what would you tell somebody who wasn't sure if this was a path for them? You had to fill in this blank, don't take this job if you will blank.
Oh, I mean, it's a long list. I mean, don't pursue your dream if you're not prepared to starve. And I'm not trying to hustle porn this, by the way, like, not everyone pursuing their dream is starving, but a lot of us are. Don't do it if you're not willing to starve, lose your salary, lose many of your friends, lose their respect. Some people will think that you've died or you are a loser. Be prepared. Be prepared to lose your home. Be prepared to not be able to go back to where you were before. Be prepared for failure. And I don't just mean like incremental failure. I mean you pursuing your dream and it not working out. Because most of the time that is what happens, unfortunately, to people. Be prepared for all of these things. But as they say in Fight Club, only when you've lost everything are you free to do anything. And that is so true. Because when you have nothing to lose, you have everything to gain, because you have the courage to do so. It's not because you're a blank slate. It's because you are so persistent and you are willing to go through hell to get through heaven. So yeah, it's succinctly, be prepared to lose everything. I'm not implying you should. I'm not implying everyone does. I'm not implying you have to, but you have to be prepared for it.
I think you need to know what you're risking to go down this path.
Yeah, 100%. Oh, and health. I forgot health. Yeah, be prepared for your health to suffer. And I don't just mean mental health. I mean physical health.
Yeah. Okay, so I know you have a hard stop in a couple minutes, but I wanted to, before I pivot to kind of what's next for you, we'll end on that note. I wanted to go through a couple of one word or a questionnaire where you answer in one word. Okay, just the first thing that comes to mind. Some unfiltered thing. So what inspires you?
Everything.
Work of art that you wish you'd created?
Pokemon.
Proudest achievement?
Coming.
Fictional characters you most identify with?
Holden Caulfield.
Okay, fictional character who'd be your dream partner?
Ooh.
Mine's Captain Von Trapp and Robin Hood, for instance.
Oh, that's interesting.
My friend picked young Simba, and then another one said Amelie. So I think it's an interesting personality test.
It is. I'm thinking about romantic partners and what I look for. There is no fictitious partner that's ideal. I would say it's the ones I'm writing in my universe. All art is autobiographical, even if it's fictitious, right? So yeah, there's nobody yet, but you'll see it in my book.
Nice. I can't wait. Okay, this is not one word, but what would you want written on your tombstone? It's on.
I used to ask people this.
Our teacher in grade school actually made us draw our tombstones, and she was saying, awareness of mortality and knowing what you want your legacy to be is super important. So she drilled that into us when we were 10 years old.
No, I believe in this. I would say, so the answer I think is just my name. That should be enough. I think that's what we're all trying to earn. We're not trying to earn titles or awards and all that. No one remembers what Steve Jobs, Mother Teresa, MLK earned. They just know their names and what it evokes and what it means. So I think my name is enough. I also think my birthday is enough. I don't think my death date matters, because in theory, you can live forever if you build something that does, and that's always the goal.
Amazing. Okay. What podcasts are you listening to right now?
None.
Okay. Recommended reading?
Sorry.
People. No, it's fine. I mean, that's how you have time to do all the stuff you do. Recommended reading. It can be a book, short form article, meme, like anything that people must read right now.
There's so much. I think Martin Seligman's Learned Optimism book is the most practical book I've ever read about like earned resilience. I read a ton of poetry. I think Joseph Campbell, not to be tropey, The Power of Myth is essential reading because it'll help start to open your eyes on how concentric the world is, specifically through all our mythos and our religions. I think that's really important. I think Cheryl Strayed's Tiny Beautiful Things has taught me so many things about love that are all so essential that we need to know. And this is not just romantic sexual love. This is like platonic love as well. Platonic love, that might be an oxymoron, but you know what I mean. Love that is given in all forms to all forms of people and relationships. I think that's essential. Yeah.
Who would you want to play you in the movie about your life?
I have no idea, but I am mostly the protagonist of my novel, and one of my little brothers, Ryan Potter, is who in my head I like think about when I write this character. I love Rye because like he is so like sincerely present, creative, and open to the world in all capacity, industry, people, career, friendships, all the things. But he also comes with this incredible like debonair, like charm, charisma, that's also balanced by this weird, whimsical, quirky, side as well. So probably, I mean, he's a Hapa, he's not like Taiwanese. So he doesn't look like me at all, but, or I don't look like him, but as far as like my own creative universe, I do think about someone like him, to play.
Okay. Any hidden talents?
I am a former world champion woodcarver.
Not so hidden anymore. Makes a cameo in your franchise.
Yeah.
When the movie based on what you've written is on screen, you can have your wood carvings in the background.
Maybe. Yeah, maybe.
Okay, last one before we move on to the future portion of this. How do you eat an Oreo?
Wait, sorry. How do I what?
How do you eat an Oreo?
Oh, you obviously twist it off, you lick the sugar, and you throw away the cookie.
What does it say about you?
I only go for the good stuff.
Okay.
Excess is irrelevant.
Completely agree. All right, so what's next? Moving to the future portion, we talked about like what you're doing right now, how you got there. Like looking forward, what's next in terms of your career plans and goals?
What's next is everything I'm doing now. Launching the franchise hopefully this year. So like the novel, suit line, all that. Taking Gold House in our phase 2 of building a Pacific bridge where we can reliably co-invest and co-distribute creative and companies, from Western soft power to highest growth Eastern power. I want to balance out the world a little bit more, and I think it's a little still too Westernized. Though obviously I'm complicit and love that because I'm from the West, so that's important. Building a family is extremely important to me in the next 3 to 5 years. I really honestly, by now I was hoping I'd have my first kid, but life unfortunately does not evolve at the pace that you dream about when you're a child because your sense of time is warped because you only have a few years, but that's really important to me. And then making sure I earn enough money to buy my mom like a fuck you level house and her dream car, or one of her 2 dream cars, is also very important to me.
Okay. How can people, get involved with your project if you're looking for collaborators in the future?
I'm always open, because I don't know what I don't know in many cases. And so, you can follow me on all social media platforms. I'm just like Bing Chen is just my name. And yeah, like several of the richest collaborations have come organically. I will say that for Gold House, as well as my creative franchise, there will be very structured and more obvious ways that people can participate really, really, really soon. So excited about that.
Sure. For people looking at the headlines right now, we're living in a very kind of tumultuous, turbulent time. What were the best words someone once told you that made you feel things were going to be okay? Aside from the Mr. Rogers quote.
I don't know if it's a word, but historically humans have always gone through like periods of travesty, and we've always made it out alive. So like there's all these examples of like other pandemics, maybe not to the degree of this past one, but not even this current one, but we always make it out alive because we have no other choice. Our species is much more resilient than people think, or people would like to believe. But yeah, like, we'll make it all out alive because we will it so. And yeah, I think that's it. Like, rinse and repeat.
Yeah, in terms of the kind of civil rights movements as well as the political upheavals, I think what you said about, giving people representation, making them envision a more equitable society, those will all go a really long way toward creating the world that you want to live in. So I think the work that you're doing is extremely important, and I really appreciate your taking the time to share that with the listeners, because I think all of us could stand to benefit from your words and the lens by which you look at the world. So from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for talking to us.
Oh, you're so kind.
Yeah, I wish you all the best on your creative endeavors. I can't wait to see them and to see, feel, touch, smell, taste.
Thanks, Jojo. Fingers crossed. Hopefully it doesn't suck.
Past is precedent, so.
Well, let's hope so. Who knows?
Come on, you're going to catch them all.
We'll see. We'll see.
On that note, have a good rest of your day. And
thank you. We'll talk soon. Thanks for doing this.
Bye.
All right. Bye.